Let me tell you something unusual about silence in the digital era. We exist in a world where almost everything gets displayed. Birthdays, coffee mugs, sunsets, tears, laughter, even struggles dressed up with filters. Yet some people remain completely unseen. They scroll quietly, notice everything, but rarely, if ever, share anything. You might even know someone like that. Maybe you are someone like that. And here's the question that always hangs in people's minds. Why? Why would someone choose to stay hidden when the entire world seems desperate to be noticed? It's easy to assume that people who don't post are just shy or introverted. But that's not the whole story. Beneath the surface, there's a full psychology in motion, one that reveals a lot about human nature, self awareness, and a subtle resistance against a culture obsessed with constant visibility. Music. See, for some people, silence isn't emptiness at all. It's control. It's the ability to decide what the world doesn't have permission to see. Because whether we like it or not, social media has quietly reshaped how we define who we are. It rewards performance, it celebrates noise. And still, those who choose quietness, who stay in the shadows, are often the ones who see everything most clearly. They watch without needing to intrude. They think before they respond. They reflect before they judge. Psychologists have noticed something interesting. People who avoid posting frequently tend to score higher on traits like self control, introspection, and emotional autonomy. They're usually less driven by comparison and external approval. In simple terms, they're not trying to prove who they are, they're trying to understand it. And in a world overflowing with performances, that's uncommon. Because let's be honest, most of what we share isn't just communication, it's identity sculpting. It's an unconscious audition for belonging. Every caption, every photo, every update whispers, "This is me. Do you approve?" But when you stop posting, something changes. You begin to detach your worth from digital applause. You stop thinking in captions. You start experiencing moments for yourself again instead of for a lens. And that's the quiet psychology behind many people who don't post. They crave something real in a space where everything feels staged. They don't dislike social media. They just can't locate themselves in it anymore. It's not about being anti technology or anti-social. It's about refusing to squeeze your life into highlight reels. Because once you see how easily perception can be manipulated, you start valuing what can't be uploaded: silence, depth, imperfection, truth. For some, the choice not to post comes after a kind of emotional fatigue. Maybe they once shared everything until one day it stopped feeling honest. They realized that each time they posted something beautiful, they felt a subtle pressure to keep out doing it. They weren't living anymore, they were performing. So they stepped away quietly. No announcement, just a gradual fading from the feed. But here's what people often misunderstand: not posting doesn't mean not feeling, it doesn't mean they don't care. It often means they care deeply about presence, about meaning, about guarding what's sacred. There's a concept in psychology called psychological ownership. It's that feeling that something is profoundly yours: a thought, a memory, an experience. And when you post it, that sense of ownership dissolves just a bit. The moment becomes communal property, open to judgment, distortion, even ridicule. So people who don't post are often protecting their sense of ownership over their life itself. They keep their moments untouched, private, whole. And maybe that's not avoidance or withdrawal. Maybe it's a gentle form of freedom. Because think about it. When was the last time you did something meaningful and didn't feel the impulse to share it? When was the last time you laughed, cried, or accomplished something without immediately thinking of posting? That reflex, that urge to display, isn't natural. It's conditioned. It's the result of years of likes, shares, and dopamine loops, teaching our minds to confuse validation with worth. And when someone steps outside that pattern, it can look like rebellion, but it's also healing. They start rediscovering the simplicity of doing things purely for themselves. Cooking without photographing it, traveling without tagging it, feeling without narrating it. In that quiet, something awakens, a form of self awareness that doesn't need spectators. But not everyone who avoids posting does it from a place of peace. Some do it from fear of judgment, rejection, or misinterpretation. Social media has intensified a subtle form of anxiety psychologists call self presentational pressure. The constant sense that you're being observed even when you're not. And for many, that's exhausting. They worry their words might be misread or worse, ignored. So they retreat, not because they don't want connection, but because the cost of visibility feels too heavy. They want to be seen, but genuinely, not superficially. And ironically, the quietest people online often have the loudest minds. They're not absent, they're overflowing. They just choose stillness over spectacle. There's a deep philosophical layer to that silence. In a world constantly shouting, "Look at me," choosing invisibility becomes a kind of self defense. It's saying, I exist beyond your perception. They might scroll through others' lives, nodding, smiling, sometimes aching, but they rarely project because they understand something many ignore. Not everything you experience is meant to be witnessed. Sometimes the most transformative things, growth, grief, change, happen quietly, unposted, unseen, and when you've moved through enough of those private shifts, you realize that being unseen isn't the same as being unimportant. It's actually the place where identity is built, not performed. This is the paradox. Social media was designed to connect us, yet it often leaves people feeling more isolated. When you stop posting, you stop chasing digital closeness and start rebuilding actual closeness. You begin to notice who checks on you without constant updates. You learn who remembers you without reminders. That type of connection, raw, private, unbroadcasted, feels heavier, warmer, more genuine. And people who don't post live inside that space, they form relationships that don't need proof. They find comfort in unshared moments. They let life happen without turning it into content. Part of this is also about identity stability, knowing who you are even when no one is watching. When you're comfortable in your own company, you don't need an audience to verify your value. That's not arrogance, it's calmness. And ironically, those who rarely post often have the most compelling stories, but they reserve them for moments when you're sitting across from them, not across a screen, because real connection to them isn't measured in reactions. It's in shared silence, in eye contact, in laughter that doesn't need spectators. These are people who hold entire worlds inside them, who notice constantly, feel deeply, and understand quietly. They don't need global applause to justify their existence. They just need to live it. And maybe in a world desperate to be noticed, their silence isn't a weakness. It's a reflection, a reminder that not every meaningful thing needs to be shared, that sometimes the most human thing you can do is keep something entirely for yourself. You know what's interesting? The longer someone stays away from social media, the more vividly they begin to experience life. Colors seem richer, time feels slower, conversations feel deeper, as if stepping away from the noise makes everything real again. Because when you stop performing, you start living. There's a quiet beauty in moving through the world without needing evidence of every step. You're not thinking about angles or captions. You're just present, fully inside the moment instead of outside it. And that's something social media rarely allows anymore. But the psychology behind this reaches deeper than preference. It's tied to how our brains process reward. Every time something we post gets attention, likes, hearts, comments, our brain releases dopamine, the same chemical tied to reward and addiction. With time, we begin to crave that hit. We start evaluating life through the lens of what's shareable. Now, imagine someone who steps out of that loop, someone who intentionally breaks away from that dopamine cycle. That's not indifference, that's discipline. It takes awareness to resist something engineered to keep you hooked. People who don't post often have a strong internal sense of control, meaning their worth comes from within, not from outer approval. They don't need a digital echo saying you're enough to believe it. And here's something even more telling. Research shows that those who take long breaks from posting or consuming social media often experience noticeable increases in emotional steadiness and life satisfaction. Because when your identity is no longer constantly reflected back at you, it becomes grounded, it becomes real. You're not editing your life into something digestible, you're living it in all its messy, beautiful, raw complexity. And maybe that's the true rebellion, staying whole in a world that rewards fragments. But online silence isn't always serenity. Sometimes it hides weariness. For many, social media was once a place for connection, but turned into a place that drained them. There's a quiet emotional fatigue that comes from watching everyone's highlight reels while you're trying to make sense of your own behind the scenes. You start comparing even when you don't intend to. You question your worth even when you logically know better. Eventually, some people step away not from bitterness, but from self preservation. They realize they don't owe the world a performance. They don't owe explanations for their silence. They don't owe proof of their happiness to be believed. That's one of the hidden truths of our era. We've mistaken visibility for value. We assume that to matter, we must be seen. But real meaning doesn't need witnesses. Some of the most defining moments of your life, the ones that shape you, will happen privately. No cameras, no captions, no audience, just you. And maybe that's what people who don't post understand. They know privacy isn't loneliness, it's intimacy with yourself. Because when you stop broadcasting every thought, you start hearing your own again. You reconnect with the parts of yourself that got drowned in noise, your subtle desires, your unspoken fears, your inner direction. And that's something almost spiritual today. It's not withdrawing, it's returning home. Of course, it's not always easy. There are moments of doubt, moments where you wonder if silence makes you invisible, if you're falling behind while others perform progress. But eventually, you notice something reassuring. Your worth doesn't vanish when no one is watching. It stays steady and quiet, like the hum of a room after a storm. And maybe that's real confidence, not the loud online declaration of self, but the calm offline certainty of it. Some people say, if you didn't post it, did it even happen? But the truth is, the experiences that shape you the most rarely make it online. Your growth, heartbreaks, internal victories, moments of kindness, they live in memory, not media, and maybe that's enough. When psychologists talk about authentic self expression, they mention congruence, the alignment between who you are inside and who you show outside. But in an age of filters, that alignment constantly wavers. You begin living as a version of yourself created for approval. So when someone chooses not to post, it may be their way of staying congruent, maintaining that delicate connection between inner truth and outer expression. They don't need everyone to see their feelings for them to be valid. They don't need to capture every sunset to remember its warmth. They live fully and quietly. And here's the irony: those who live quietly often feel the world most intensely. They're not distracted by the presentation of it. They absorb details others overlook: the way shadows shift across a wall, the breath someone takes before speaking, faint laughter in the distance. They're present, and presence is the rarest currency in a world built on attention. But sometimes that very presence makes them misunderstood. People may see them as detached, mysterious, or cold, but if you look closer, their silence isn't emptiness, it's depth. It's the stillness that comes from no longer needing to explain yourself to be understood. There's a quiet strength in not needing everyone to know you, just a few who truly get you. And that's what people who don't post understand. They know not every truth belongs to the crowd. Some pieces of you deserve to stay untouched by algorithms and opinions. Because the moment something becomes public, it stops being entirely yours. It becomes open to interpretation, judgment, trend, and some moments are too sacred for that. So the next time you notice someone who never posts, don't assume they're hiding. Maybe they're simply living. Maybe they found peace in the quieter corners of existence, the ones not lit by the blue glow of a screen. Maybe they're the ones who remembered what the rest of us forgot: that being unseen doesn't mean being alone, that being quiet doesn't mean being empty, that sometimes the truest expression of who you are is silence. Because in the end, we're not meant to be performances, we're meant to be people. And the people who don't post, they remind us of that every quiet, unfiltered, beautifully invisible moment.